Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new time today. We've got some meetings later this afternoon. We had some this morning, so I appreciate everybody being able to be here at noon. We'll try and get through this as quickly as we possibly can. And this is the Public Safety and Justice Affairs Committee meeting this January 5th. Happy New Year to everybody. Roll call.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Greenspan. Mr. Greenspan is absent. Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Harrison.
Here.
Ms. Conwell.
Here.
There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
Welcome, Mr. Miller. Public comment.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Reverend Pinckney.
Good afternoon once again.
Good afternoon.
I want to continue this conversation. I'd like to ask permission of the chair if I may combine my 3 minutes, and so it'd be 6 in total, so, because I have to go to another meeting when I leave here.
As best you can.
Okay, I'll do everything I can within that time frame. I wanted to just follow up, and I still salute you and greet you in the peace of Jesus Christ. I didn't come here to declare war against the county council, so I just want you to know that. I do want to give you information, though. I have followed your instructions that you all have given me to the letter. I've even filed my concern for my freedom of information request, and it never has followed through. No one ever gets back to me. And I wanted to come to the safety committee meeting today because it's time for the things I've been bringing to you to come to a halt. Let me see what this date is. On the 18th of December, I received a second referral from the city prosecutor for the 5th District to give me felony police reports for the city of Cleveland, and they're refusing to do so. When you do your agenda items, I would like for you to consider both of these items because they do matter in reference to the situations I've been bringing to this organization, this county council. You're talking about software and you're talking about 911 public safety. Somewhere in the software and the 911 safety database, I am marked negatively. And when I call 911 for safety issues, I get into a discussion with people who argue with me instead of sending me a police car. And when President Obama came to Cleveland in 2015, Secret Service ran my driver's license and asked me wasn't I on psychiatric medication and seeing a psychiatrist. I also, when I got assaulted in Greater Friendship Baptist Church on Veterans Day in November, I asked for a felony report and the 5th District refused to give me a police report they have for a felony for assault. Prosecutor McGinty promised to meet with me on June 3rd, 2014 at 3 o'clock in the evening when I met him at Olivet Institutional Baptist Church at a pastoral engagement in reference to my children and myself being raped and other horrendous crimes being committed against me. I think it's very insulting that when I do a police report or file a complaint, I'm labeled as mentally ill for doing so. And I'm insulted by that, to say the least, and I don't blame the county council for this at all. I am very concerned, though, because I also have here interstate communications and county jurisdictional communications between Cuyahoga County and Marion County, where when James McCafferty was the director of Children and Family Services, he put something down in here that changed the course of my life, which was not even true. He says here that he thought the referral was done through the mental health system in his efforts to put me in the mental health system because he did not want to handle my complaints. And I'm going to go back to what I said as I get ready to leave. I want you to, because I wrote to the 911 people when they had a meeting on the west side. I wrote a letter to them, Mr. Gallagher, and asked them to look at my concerns. And not one of them has gotten back to me. Not one of the sheriffs has gotten back to me. Not McFall, Bova, Reed, or Sheriff Pinckney has gotten back to me on any of my safety concerns. And I'm bringing this to you because I am currently suing the Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections and the City of Cleveland Police Department, the City of Shaker Heights, and some others in reference to my safety concerns. I'm asking you, Mr. Gallagher, Chairman Gallagher, and council members, please take this very, very seriously, and for my ballots to disappear in 2 general elections, and not one investigation has been done. The only thing that happened to me was I got locked up in the psych ward in a hospital for asking about my presidential campaign ballot. Please hear me. I don't want this year. I'm not even trying to go into 2017 like this. I do want to live. And I do want to write to the tree of life. And I know you're tired of hearing the story. I know you are. And I know, and I appreciate you. But now I can't even get medical care in a hospital. Because when they go to the computer in the hospital, they refuse me physical care because they're claiming I'm supposedly mentally ill and deny me physical medical care. My mom couldn't even get me medical care almost. She had to go with me to get me into an emergency room because they said it was in my mind, only to find out I had multiple issues going on in my body as a result of being beat up by police, sheriff's deputies, and others. And if you find somebody who is mentally ill, don't let them fall through the cracks of the system. And because a person is mentally ill does not mean that the police have a right to beat them up or for them to fall through the cracks of the system. Thank you very much. God bless you and Happy New Year. Please follow up on my concerns that I have addressed to Judge Russo, because my case with Judge Kathleen Ansatula keeps being played with as if I'm some type of Joe. She had the nerve to order me to move into my parents' home and then rule against me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In your packet, you have the minutes of our meeting December 1st. If they're in order, I'll accept a motion.
Second.
All in favor? Against? Thank you. Resolution 2015-0279.
Yes, and Mr. Chair, I'd also like the record to reflect that Councilman Greenspan is in attendance and Councilmember Brown.
Thank you.
Resolution number 2015-0279, a resolution authorizing various contracts with Sadler Nicamp Financial Services doing business as ProWare in the total amount not to exceed $18,500,000 for general computer system support, each for the period 1/1/2016 through 12/31/2020.
Okay, I see in the audience we have Clerk Court Byrd and her trustee, I don't even know what to say, Mr. Boyle. Trustee Mr. Boyle.
I'll take that.
Who's here to speak? Ms. McNeely?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I just wanted to give you guys an update of where we're at, kind of where we're going, what the plan is moving forward with this contract. So what we're planning on doing is submitting to you some signed documents by the vendor in the next week or so that we can have a full discussion on a final version. We're going to be entering into a master services contract with ProWare, and then there will be 3 additional pricing schedules that you'll have in front of you. One for the Court of Common Pleas General Division and the Clerk of Court, one for probate court, and one for domestic relations. So all 3 courts and the clerk have come together and have worked with the law department to come to an agreement with ProWare that protects the county's interest, the court's interest, the clerks, kind of everyone. We've been working together, have come to some, made some really good progress and cleaned this up a bit. There's a few minor things that we're just working out the last details on, but we're pretty close. I hope by next week that we have some signed contracts for you guys to review and then get this moving along.
Thank you very much, Ms. McNeely. I had been meeting with her. As we're all aware, the ProWare contract has been a bone of contention with at least myself and many members of the council. We've watched this closely. This has not always been the easiest thing to do. But from the private sector, Ms. McNeely, this is what she did. So I had great confidence in her ability to move the contract forward in the best interest of the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County. And I think we've come as close as we can to that kind of contract that I'm comfortable with. And again, I put all my faith in Ms. McNeely here, and I think she has delivered for us. It's not complete yet. When it is complete in the next week or two, we'll call another meeting, we'll go through it, make sure everybody's comfortable. At that point in time, I would like a member from ProAir to be here, preferably one of the principals, and we will then attach our final approval. But from what I've seen so far, and if you could provide the council, if you haven't already, access to the contract, so they could be prepared to ask any questions for the next meeting when this is finalized.
I can do that.
Is there any questions, ma'am?
Through the chair, just in the last whereas clause on the master service agreement, state sole source. I'm a little confused by that. I know we have other organizations that can offer us licensure and things of that nature. So I'm just wondering why ProAir has certified itself to be the sole source.
So ProAir owns the software that's proprietary to them, and they are the only ones that can provide support on their system. I'm not aware of any other vendor that has authorization from ProAir to provide support.
Okay, so it's just basically on there. Okay, I misread that wrong. Thank you.
Mr. Greenspan and Mr. Miller.
Great, thank you. Just a question on the usage of ProAir. So it's used by three primary users: the Sheriff's Department, the courts in general, and the Clerk of Courts, correct?
Correct.
What usage percentage does each of those three entities use the software?
A slight correction. So it's not used primarily by the sheriff. There is a function provided for the sheriff, and there's also functionality for Court of Appeals. The majority for the general division and clerk contract, the majority of the services being provided are for the court and the clerk. There's a small subset of services that they're working in combination, so it's the sheriff working with the clerk and court that they've added that functionality and support for that within the contract.
So just from a usage perspective then, of the four users, the courts, the Clerk of Courts, the sheriff, and the Court of Appeals, what percentage of usage does each?
Naila Bird, Clerk of Courts. Good afternoon. I think Councilman Greenspan, just to clarify a little bit, is the Clerk of Courts and the General Division of the Court of Common Pleas are really the main users of the agreement. And we use it, 50-50. We both use it. We use it for projects that are beneficial to both of us. We may have a project that the sheriff needs assistance on, which would benefit both the clerk and the court. And we've allowed the sheriff to come in and have certain SARs done for that. But I would not classify it as four different users. The Court of Appeals at times uses the system, but they're really on a system called Buckeye, which they use. So does that answer your question or provide a little more clarity?
So if you say 49, 49, and 2% to the sheriff, is that about? And just the Court of Appeals is just an ancillary user?
Yeah.
I think that would be fair.
Okay. And then of the costs associated with ProAir, this 18.5 million, where is that money coming from?
So the number's actually going to be adjusted
Okay.
down slightly, but for the Court of Common Pleas General Division and Clerk, it is budgeted right now in the clerk's budget. Probate uses a court computerization fund, and domestic relations, I believe, uses general fund.
So 100% of the costs are borne by the Clerk of Court, is in the Clerk of Court's budget?
Correct.
So this whatever the 18.5 million here, whatever it is 100% funded by the Clerk of Courts?
Yes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Yes, to Ms. Bird. When you said the General Division of the Court of Common Pleas is a primary user, does that include does that include probate and juvenile, or is it in a narrow sense?
It's in a more narrow sense. So the Court of Common Pleas General Division is really presiding administrative judge John Russo's realm. It's the General Division. That is what it's called. So probate is separate, although they will be signed on to this master services agreement, is my understanding. And their money, as Emily said, comes from a special fund. Probate division, the Court of Common Pleas juvenile division, they're not on ProWare at all as of today.
Okay. And second question to either, probably Ms. McNeely, is the question, to what extent is this system compatible with the other main computer systems that the county uses, or is it entirely separate and not compatible?
So there's functionality in the system that does work with other systems based on what the courts and the clerk's needs are. Right now, it is a standalone system, but where the court or clerk needs an interface to another system, there is room within the contract, and ProWare has been helpful in creating those interfaces. So there are systems where this does talk to other things. The sheriff and the Court of Appeals are two examples of that. The clerk has also implemented an interface with mailing services companies to reduce the costs of how much the clerk spends in mail. So, we put the investment into the system, and then the clerk's able to see some return in other areas. So there is the ability to create these interfaces with other systems when the need arises.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? As you can see, Mr. Greenspan and Mr. Miller have hit on what I think we've always been concerned about. And as lay people up here, it's funny how we see things clearly and others don't. I understand the comfort that ProWare provides to the users, but just because they're comfortable doesn't mean it works. Or they're used to that cake, and that cake's always good. Doesn't mean that we like it. I think this is a system, or this is a project right for the Supreme Court. I'm convinced the Supreme Court has to change this. The federal court and the net courts in the United States are all in one system, and it works. There's no reason the state of Ohio can't do that. And I don't know if anybody knows anybody going to Columbus next year. Maybe they'd have some input and some sway with the Supreme Court to start getting the courts in line in Ohio to use one system that would be compatible to all the courts and all the users. We don't have that now, and it's broken. It's costing tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars over short periods of time. These are taxpayer dollars, and again, I would recommend anybody maybe going down to Columbus in the near future would maybe look at this as a special project to prod the Supreme Court into moving in a forward direction, as the previous Chief Justice was about to do before he unfortunately passed away and his project was shelved. And with that shelving, tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars went with it. So that's my spiel for the day. Mr. Germano might have more.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just remembering the testimony way back almost to the Justice Center. I mean, there was a point where there was concern of the different branches where they were not even talking together. I'm just wondering if that's all been settled. And the other part of this, there was so much talk about being compatible with e-filing. What could it work, not work? Has that all been resolved? Has ProWare been brought up to date?
So the first part of your question is yes, I believe I am in communication and have a good relationship, as I've said to you all before, with the courts, both Domestic Relations, Court of Appeals, and the General Division. To answer your first part of your question, the second part of your question is e-filing is up and running through our ProWare system. It's working great. Domestic relations is not yet e-filing, although we do believe that we will be working with them this year to get them up and running, maybe starting with a smaller pilot subset and get that in place. But in terms of the general division, we are up and running with e-filing and the Court of Appeals. So things are, I think, in a better place.
I'm glad to hear that because it was pretty disconcerting to hear how things were in the past, as you know, Mr. Chairman.
Well, it's still disconcerting because we have juvenile hanging fire out there. The Muni Court's really not even in the process yet. The Court of Appeals, quite honestly, they have Buckeye going one way and they interface at a cost. There's always a cost. It'll always work if the cost is there.
But the Court of Appeals, just to be clear, the Court of Appeals is currently e-filing, so they are taking advantage of that. And as you well know, Councilman, I can't control the Muni Court or
Right.
probate or juvenile.
Right.
But just in terms of my courts, I think what my predecessor started has really, what's the word? Moved on, or, you know, we're doing well with it to the degree we can.
Well, she did an admirable job, and I'm always quick to remind everyone it cost her job. And, that's the reality and that's the truth. And I find that disappointing. But we are where we are, we're moving forward. I'm much more happy with this contract as it sits, and we'll get further into it at the next meeting when you're done. And thank you, Ms. McNeely. So far, we think you've done a wonderful job.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thank you. 2015-0280.
Resolution number 2015-0280.
Yes.
Authorizing an amendment to agreement number AG 1400121 with City of Cleveland for cellular 911 public safety answering point services originating in the City of Cleveland for the period 10/20/2014 through 10/19/2015 to extend the time period to 10/19/2017 and for additional funds in the amount not to exceed $1,200,000.
Mr. Bova, Ms. Carney?
Chairman Gallagher, Council, Frank Bova, and Brandy Carney. First of all, before you is the agreement with the City of Cleveland. This agreement is for the City of Cleveland PSAPs, the public safety answering points, to take most of their cellular 911 calls, which they're doing now. By the end of this month, they'll be taking them, every one of them except for the border calls that come in. We still take those. This extends the current contract to October 19th, 2017 at the current rate of $600,000 a year for a total of $1.2 million to the City of Cleveland from the wireless fund. This has already been, has approval from the 911 Planning Board. So that's why we're standing in front of you today. Thank you.
Could you, for the edification of the council members up here, take us through the process of the 911 call reception and how it's delegated out?
Sure. Again, Brandy Carney with Public Safety and Justice Services. So landline calls within each municipality go to directly to their respective dispatch center. However, if you call 911 from a cellular phone in Cuyahoga County, up until approximately a year ago, all of those calls came into CCOMS, and then they're transferred to another dispatch center where resources are dispatched. Over the last year, two things have occurred. One is CCOM started dispatching. So, for example, if an Olmsted Township 911 call comes in, the call comes into CCOMS, they keep the call there and they dispatch resources. The other ones are still transferred, except now for the City of Cleveland, approximately a year ago, the calls within the City of Cleveland, the core city, will go directly, or are going directly to the city. As Chief Bova stated, at the end of this month, AT&T is the last carrier that will be transitioned over for that.
Okay. I hope that's helpful. Mr. Greenspan?
Great. So just to be clear, so landline calls get routed directly into CCOMS. Into Cleveland.
Correct. To any specific entity that has a PSAP.
And the wireless gets routed through CCOMS.
Yes.
Correct.
And then CCOMS disperses it. That's why you call and they say what city is your emergency, so they can route it properly, correct?
Correct.
I know there was an issue, I don't want to over publicize an issue because I'm sure it's not only relevant to Cleveland, but there's been an issue with slow response times once the call leaves CCOMS in being received by the host community. Is there a type of protocol that exists for us, I guess, as CCOMS, to work with those local receive sites to respond to calls in a certain protocol or a certain time frame or fashion? Do we get involved in that at all, or are we just basically just dispatching calls?
Well, we do. There are 911 standards. NENA and APCO have 911 standards to answer 90% of your calls within the first 7 seconds, things like that. Those are made aware. We make them aware at 911 meetings, but those are up to each respective dispatch center. I mean, we talk about them openly in open forum, but
But you guys monitor,
we do for our calls.
right? So for the calls that you distribute, that you handle and distribute out, you can tell every community, every call, what the
They're-
average response time is.
They're all taped, and
Okay.
I just ran a report, and all of our calls were answered within 5 seconds. I think it was 99% of our calls or something very close were answered over the last month within 5 seconds. So CCOMS does a really good job monitoring that.
Okay, all right, great, thank you.
Mr. Germana.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little bit confused. At the beginning, where they're talking about the calls that are on the border. What border are we talking about? Is that the Cleveland and the rest of Cuyahoga County? Or
And
is
any
that-
contiguous city that touches Cleveland, if it's right in the border area, depending on where the towers ring it, it might ring to us instead of directly to Cleveland. So
it's the borders of-
130th and Brook Park Road, it may ring to us instead of Cleveland.
Okay,
It's because it's right on the border of several
so it's
cities there.
Cleveland, the border of Cleveland we're
That's
talking
correct.
about. Okay.
Inside Cleveland, they go directly to Cleveland.
It's a technology routing issue with the cell phone towers because it's not 100% accurate. So around the border, an example is a cell phone tower is responsible for hundreds of meters in front of it. So within that hundreds of meters, there might be the city of Cleveland as well as a contiguous city, but you have to identify one place that call is going to be sent. So because of the fact that all those border calls, we did not want them being transferred all over, CCOMS will still keep all the border calls and decide if they need to go to Cleveland versus Cleveland making that determination. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Anyone else? I see by the dates you'd want to move this forward.
That's correct.
Okay, if everybody on the committee is comfortable, I'll accept a motion for resolution 2015-0280 to the full council. Second reading suspension. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Against? Thank you.
Thank you.
Miscellaneous business? Other public comment?
No, Mr. Chair, no one is signed in.
Thank you.